welcome to a brand new episode of Business PNG. Coming up on the show, Business PNG has a chat with ANZ Chief Economist, Mr. Richard Yetsenga. Thank you for joining us on the show and welcome to Papua New Guinea.
Hi, thank you very much. Pleasure to be here.
I heard it's your first time here. How are you liking Port Moresby?
I'm kind of ashamed to say it is my first time. Yeah, it's an amazing country though.
Yeah. Okay, so we'll get straight to it. You're here for the Mining and Petroleum Conference.
Yes.
Tell us a little bit about what's happening in our economy right now. You know, what can we expect?
So, look, I think the news for Papua New Guinea has improved quite substantially. I think, like many commodity-dependent economies, the last 4 or 5 years have been a bit of a challenge. More than a challenge, I think it's been quite difficult, but the global economy looks to be in better shape and commodity prices are a bit stronger, and I think both of those things can broadly persist, maybe not in ways that we are used to in the last 10 or 20 years, but certainly better than they've been the last half a dozen years. I think for Papua New Guinea now, it's a focus now on some of the legacy issues that remain from that period. Dealing with domestic inflationary pressure, ensuring domestic liquidity is managed appropriately, having the budget back on a more sustainable footing, which I think is an objective for everybody, and managing the exchange rate regime in a way that delivers both kind of stability objectives for the Papua New Guinea economy as well as allows that kind of ease of cross-border financial access that so much of the investment in Papua New Guinea depends on.
Yeah. Okay, you mentioned the budget, and it's right now over at Waigani. The budget's been actually tabled, and there's an actual budget lockdown happening. So what do you think, Papua New Guineans, what can we expect from the budget that will be released today?
So the risk of issuing a forecast after the budget has already been written. I think there will be quite a technical focus on some of these near-term challenges. How to ensure the integrity of the revenue base, ensuring that the requirements around the Fiscal Responsibility Act are delivered into, trying to deliver into medium-term fiscal objectives against kind of short-term economic objectives. I think after that, for the government at the beginning of its term, I think it will look like an early-term budget in the sense it will be quite technical in nature. But I think for the government's agenda then, they'll be looking to step back and deliver into some of those strategic objectives that I mentioned earlier. The Mining Act is still being discussed. How to ensure cross-border kind of transparency around the currency regime, how to ensure sustainability for the economy and the settings in the medium term.
Yeah. Okay, so let's go on to the topic of foreign exchange. There has been a lack of forex in our country, and that has caused a lot of businesses to suffer. What are your thoughts on that, and how can we basically diversify the economy from that?
So I think the diversification issue is an important structural solution to some of the issues around the exchange rate at the moment. I think there is some pressure for currency depreciation at the moment, and you can see that in some shortages of foreign exchange. I think probably the policy concern is to allow more concentrated period of currency depreciation would have some uncomfortable inflationary consequences for the domestic economy, which reflects the fact that in certain parts of the economy, consumption is delivered into almost entirely by imported goods. There's not as much meshing of domestic competitors with kind of imported product. So if you depreciate the currency, the imported product can tend to go up in price without domestic competitors being able to come in, at least in the short term. So I think that strategic agenda around developing kind of import replacement industries, I think should be an important part of this government's agenda over the next few years. That issue can't be resolved in the short term, but I think it's an important part of getting kind of that balance from a strategic perspective, and so allowing the currency to perform its natural buffer kind of function.
Sure. Okay, tell us about the Asian century. I mean, it was a term dubbed by ANZ here in Papua New Guinea. So how can Papua New Guinea then capitalize on that?
So the Asian century is the really positive part of the regional growth story, and if you look now, for instance, only two economies, China and India, for instance, account for nearly half of global GDP growth. So very much the centre of global growth has very much shifted to Asia, even though the political kind of focus may remain on advanced economies. I think really that economic heft has come into the region. So that obviously opens up opportunities. And even Indonesia with a rising middle class, it's quite some decades behind China. But Papua New Guinea's proximity to that kind of consumer story obviously is really positive. And even though we're in this period of what I'd call kind of more sceptical globalisation, where countries look at each other not quite as trustingly as they used to, there's still incredible competition for foreign direct investment.
Sure.
You know, so Papua New Guinea has some great things to offer the global economy. It's got some great kind of obvious investment opportunities, but other countries are vying for those investment dollars as well. So I think, you know, that strategic focus for economic policy, to thinking about, well, what do global businesses need to see to be comfortable coming to Papua New Guinea? Ideally, they come to Papua New Guinea and they don't need to be offered tax holidays and other sorts of inducements to deal with perhaps some of the domestic structural impediments, that those impediments are dealt with directly. I think that will end up for Papua New Guinea with more of a win-win situation in terms of attracting foreign investment.
Okay. One thing on everyone's lips across the world is cryptocurrency, so Bitcoin and that sort of technology. And I know that you may want to stray away from that here in the country because we don't really have the legalities for that. But tell us a little bit about that and where you see that in PNG's future.
Look, I find it useful to think about cryptocurrencies from two perspectives. One is kind of what the price is, which the press is focused on a lot, and to be honest, I'm not that interested in that. The other part is, though, the technology which underlies that, and I think the idea of blockchain and distributed ledger is technology which has enormous potential application. I don't think it's something that any particular country needs to be a leader in. I think there will be a very long tail of adoption and the gains will spread very quickly. So I think Papua New Guinea being a watcher and a waiter is a very reasonable proposition when it comes to cryptocurrencies. But if you even think around some issues like the security and consistency of a land ownership and making that very clear and unambiguous, I think blockchain and distributed ledger technology applied to that would remove some of the inconsistencies and issues which have arisen around land ownership and land access in Papua New Guinea. That would be an enormously positive step, both for the owners, the rightful owners of the land, and the government and business who are trying to come up with commercial opportunities.
Okay, so what are some of the disadvantages, or I wouldn't say disadvantages, but what are some of the risks that Papua New Guinea could look out for, when we do take when we do adopt cryptocurrency?
Well, it's a new technology, I suppose, and so in that sense there's always risks around early adoption, which is why I think kind of waiting and watching is a useful position. Also for cryptocurrencies, I think there is this melding between the cryptocurrency piece and the conventional currency piece, and the extent to which those two things can interlink. That's a vexing issue I think a lot of people are working on. For mine, I think the distributed ledger piece is the most obviously commercializational area of cryptocurrencies.
Okay. Thank you so much, Mr. Yatsenga, for your time. Thank you for coming to Papua New Guinea, I guess. Welcome to Papua New Guinea, and I hope you do come back.
Thank you very much. I've enjoyed my visit.
Thank you.
I'm Meribatulo. This is Kokopo, East New Britain Province, and you're watching Business PNG.
Welcome back to the show. In this segment, we speak to APEC Director General Sir Charles Lepani about APEC 2018. With the recent wrap of the 2017 Vietnam APEC, the baton has now passed over to Papua New Guinea for next year's APEC to be hosted in the nation's capital, Port Moresby. According to the APEC PNG 2018 Coordination Authority, hotels, small business suppliers, and the informal sector will benefit from the heavily publicized event. The Director General of the authority, Sir Charles Lepani, stated in an interview with Business PNG that it would establish a foundation for stronger growth, bringing in much-needed foreign exchange, and that the country is ready to host.
As of a couple of months ago, we are active and alive. In other words, we're preparing actively to host APEC for next year. We are building up our capacity here in APEC Authority, and as far as staff recruitment, training, with foreign affairs protocol, security, with the help of our partners like Australia and New Zealand and US, Canada, and Indonesia. They're giving us a lot of help in terms of security and intelligence. They will be, for the leaders meeting particularly, security will be at its highest level. Australians will come with their airspace control to help our control tower people in terms of monitoring overflights and aircrafts landing and taking off. There'll be a lot of VIP aircrafts coming in, both government, state economy leaders, as well as CEOs. So it will be a very busy 12 days in November next year. Sure. But leading up to that, there'll be a series of meetings. Overall, there will be about 15,000 delegates, including 9,000 for the last 12 days of November of APEC hosting here for us. So it's going to be a big year next year for us. We are in constant discussions with our National Airports Corporation, with our Air Guinea and other airlines operators, also with hotels, venues. The only new hotel we are building at this stage is the Hilton, just across from Holiday Inn, and that is progressing well. Also the leaders meeting venue, which is APEC House, that's moving very well, scheduled to be completed in July next year. So it gives us a breathing space to see if we can, any defects that might be detected to be fixed before the November meeting. So most of the infrastructure, including the road freeway leading from the airport to all the APEC precincts, as we call them, from venues, hotel venues. When leaders arrive at the end of next year, in November, for their meeting, there will be a separate renovated area which will be sterilized for security, and leaders will be arriving there and taken to the airport, to their hotels, all the way from hotels like Airways through to Stanley here, and through Hilton, as well as Holiday Inn, and down to the town area, CBD area in Grand Papua, and also Crown Plaza, and the meeting venue. So the important thing here is Port Moresby has a very unique advantage. It's a small city compared to all the other economies, cities that have hosted APEC, with tall buildings, congested traffic. We have a relatively very easy traffic access all the way from the airport through to the meeting venues and accommodation areas. So, and not too many tall towers for security issues, and 4-lane highway. So that gives us a very good advantage as far as access in travel, in transporting our delegates to and from meeting venues. Yes.
But as time draws near, many critics question the need for PNG to host such an immense event. Many have suggested that the money invested in the event may be worthwhile elsewhere. Sir Charles said these concerns are valid and said that the authority needed to manage expectations, noting that APEC would not change PNG overnight.
Of course, these are legitimate concerns by the public and Papua New Guineans. APEC overall, there are some studies, not many. Some studies have been carried out to find out what are the costs and benefits of hosting big events such as APEC. McGill University of Canada, that I know of, have done studies where Canadians have hosted G20s, APEC, plus other major events, Commonwealth Games. It shows that one key factor that stands out, and that is name recognition. When you take big cities like New York or Paris hosting big events, people turn up and leave without too much, New York, Paris, but in PNG I think this is where our advantage is, that not many people throughout the world know about Papua New Guinea. If they do, very scant knowledge of our country. So this is the key factor that potentially will bring advantages in terms of economic development. There will be short-term benefits, for instance, to hotels, transport, airlines. That's important, but there will be long-term economic benefits. That will involve investment flows, because these are major economies we're dealing with throughout the world. China, US, Canada, Japan, South Korea, and the tigers of Southeast Asia economies that are part and parcel of APEC economic cooperation grouping. So, of course, we have Australia to our south, and the big economies in Mexico, Canada, dealing with US that's been renegotiated, NAFTA. So it's a huge event, and with potential to expose PNG. To me, apart from the LNG project with $19 billion CAPEX, capital expenditure, APEC will be the next biggest event that will put PNG on the world map, economic map. So we must not forget that potentially we stand to benefit greatly from us hosting for the first time. And it will be the largest event we've ever hosted. So that's very important.
I'm Leon Jurari in Lorengau, and you're watching Business PNG. With world leaders ascending into the country, including US President Donald Trump, who was formally invited to the summit earlier this year, it is imperative that counter-terrorist measures be pursued due to the fact that Papua New Guinea shares a border with Indonesia, a country that has experienced its fair share of malicious attacks. According to the APEC Authority, extensive preparation has been underway, with the APEC Joint Security Task Force leading the groundwork.
The important thing to know about security, or to understand about security issues, no country, no economy in the world can guarantee security for their citizens. You see that happening in the United States, both domestic and international threats, Europe, everywhere, despite the fact that they have the highest levels of capability to deal with security issues. PNG, we will depend on our partners. They are here to help us. Australia, New Zealand, as I mentioned, Canada, US, and Indonesia. Indonesia, the issue of the border, as you rightly said, is very critical. Important thing is the preparation in intelligence. That is critical. Intelligence is very critical to affect our security preparation. So we are working with all our partners to deal with all these issues at this stage, and we feel comfortable that we can see APEC through without too much security, but you cannot guarantee these things.
According to Sir Charles, regional centers will also benefit from the event. Delegates will make day trips to other parts of PNG using the national carrier, Air Guinea, who he said will be earning a cool 40 to 50 million kina, moving delegates around the country.
We will try as best we can. Two issues to consider here. One is the capacity, that is for them to accommodate delegates, and the other is Air Guinea or transport to fly them to these venues. We don't want delegates to be stranded, because basically it's a 2-day meeting for ministerials, and then about week or so for SOMs, which are going to all be held here because they are big senior officials meetings. But ministerials, you're looking about 200 ministers and officials traveling. So we need cities or regional centers that can accommodate at least around 200 delegates per meeting for 2 days running, but they will be arriving a day or so earlier and leaving a day or so later. So you're looking at 4 or 5 days continuous, and their capacity to supply food and water, communication networks, etc. So they're all going to be factored in, but where they cannot host these ministerials or some technical working groups, we will have to fly delegates on a day's trip, charter the flight to these venues where we think there will be opportunities for delegates to observe and enjoy a bit of Papua New Guinea culture and our natural biodiversity. So it's all in a plan. We are talking to the regional centers already. TMM10, a ministerial meeting we've just had in October. We took the delegates to Alotau, Milne Bay, and they thoroughly enjoyed the boat trip, coming back to observe some cultural dancing groups as well as some small, medium-sized enterprises displaying their wares. So it went very well.
The proposed theme for the summit is creating inclusive opportunities, embracing the digital future, a theme that reflects the twin aims of APEC, trade liberalization and improving infrastructure. The summit and the ministerial and working group meetings in the lead-in will concentrate on 4 key areas: extractive industry policies, tourism, structural adjustment, and how digital technology can help medium and small businesses. Agriculture, financial inclusion, and women in the economy will also be topics.
They will be involved under various agenda items for APEC through innovation and digital economy, through women in economy. These are agenda items we will be dealing with, and medium to small scale enterprises. So in that regard, yes, we expect a lot of our young people to be particularly a digital economy. We look forward to their contribution to this issue that will be part of our hosting. As you know, our hosting theme is embracing opportunities, future opportunities, and digital economy benefits that will flow from that. So we look forward to, and our Prime Minister also highlighted those issues in his interventions with the other leaders. Our agriculture, our health and education will benefit from digital e-commerce, as well as small-scale, medium-sized enterprises. He quoted the Goroka Bilum lady who sells her bilums to New York through internet. So these are opportunities that our young people can very easily contribute to during APEC meeting, but substantively going forward after APEC to establish the economic basis and contacts and through e-commerce with the other delegates coming for these meetings. At this stage, we are very comfortable with our preparations, having gone through one APEC meeting in October. We learned from our issues that we are very we feel very comfortable at the stage of preparation we are in, and the first real hosting event that we will host is in the beginning of December, the initial senior officials meeting, informal senior officials meeting that we are very well prepared for it at this stage, and look forward to starting off our hosting in a good on a good footing.
And that's all we have for this episode of Business PNG. For more information, or if you would simply like to view this episode again, visit EMTV online at the URL at the bottom of your screen. Or to simply join the conversation, like our page on Facebook or follow us on Twitter at the Twitter handle at Business PNG. Until next week, have a pleasant evening. I'm Leah Jarari, and this was Business PNG.